All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. In Yas Hashem, we are on our second installment of Megillas Esther, and it's probably one of the most exciting Sfarim to learn for so many different reasons. So last week we focused on Achashverosh. This week in Yas Hashem, we're going to focus on Esther Hamalka and a little bit of a deeper understanding as to who she was, what she was, and by extension, what we are able to learn from this dramatic and incredible personality. So if you take a look at source number 1, so when we are introduced to Esther, the Megillah says as follows: Vahi omines Hadassah, he Esther bas Dodo. So remember again, this is the beginning of the Megillah to give you a little bit of context. So remember again, Achashverosh has launched his beauty pageant to go ahead and find queen number 2. So the Megillah introduces us to Esther. Who was Esther? So the Megillah says, Vahi omen, Mordechai brought up Esther. As Hadassah, he Esther bas Dodo, she was his niece, or his uncle's daughter. Ki eila avaim, she had no parents. V'hana'ara yifas toar v'tovas marem. She was very beautiful. Ubamos avia v'ima likacha Mordechai lo libas. And ultimately, when her parents died, Mordechai took her. Libas seems to me, at least on the most basic level, as a daughter. Now, of course, what's immediately striking about the pasuk? Just right when you look at the pasuk, what's the part that just jumps out at you from the beginning? What would you say? So, right, that's dramatic. That obviously she was orphaned at a young age. But even look at the beginning of the pasuk. If you notice, Vahi omines Hadassah he Esther. So what's her name? What's her name, right? Is it Hadassah or is it Esther? What is, remember again, Esther is the heroine of the story. So take a look at number 2. So the Gemara Maseches Megillah says, excuse me, Vahi omines Hadassah, Karli Hadassah v'Karla Esther. So the Megillah calls her Hadassah and also calls her Esther. Rabbi Meir says, Esther Shma. Her name was actually Esther. Valama nikra Shma Hadassah. So again, why was she called Hadassah if her name was actually Esther? Al Shema Tzadikim Shenikru Hadassim. Because the tzaddikim, the righteous, are often called hadassim. A hadas, of course, is a myrtle branch. So again, why are tzaddikim called hadassim? Because just like the hadas, the myrtle branch, has a fragrant smell, so to tzaddikim, the righteous, because of their deeds, create a fragrant smell as well. So the first opinion the Gemara says, her given name, her birth name was Esther. Hadassah was more of what we would call a descriptive name. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hadassah Shma. No, her name was actually Hadassah. But Lama Nikres Shma Esther. So why was she called Esther? Al Shem Shahaisa Misateres Devareha. Because remember again, the shoresh of the name, the root of the word Esther is Samech Saf Reish Seser, which means secret. So her given name was actually Hadassah, but she was called Esther almost like as more of a descriptive name, because again, she was secretive. Remember, Esther did not divulge her identity. Ein Esther Malgedes Molaratan. No one knew who she was. No one knew her name, or no one knew her true identity. Shenemar Ein Esther Magedes Es Amma. So the Rabbi Nechemia Omer Hadassah Shema, her name was really Hadassah. Velama Nikres Esther. Why was she called Esther? Shaya Umos Olam Korin Osal Shem Istaher. Interestingly enough, apparently in Babylonian and Persian, so Istaher means the moon. People were so overwhelmed by Esther's beauty that they called her Istaher. She was as beautiful or as luminescent as the moon. So an incredible Gemara. So if you look at the heroine of the story, what's her name? There's a machlokas. Was her name Esther, her given name Esther, and Hadassah is a descriptive name because of her righteousness? Or her given name was Hadassah, and her descriptive name was Esther because she was very secretive about her identity. By the way, just as an aside, this idea that Esther was secretive about her identity, kind of following up on the heels of last week's shir, this is why Achashverosh was very enamored by her. Right? Remember again, Achashverosh, what was he looking for? What were the chief qualities he was looking for in wife number 2? Right? And Achashverosh sat down with the Shadchan and was telling him, what is he looking for in a wife? What was he primarily looking for in a wife? Anonymity. He did not want anyone who was going to be a threat to his claim. Remember again, this is all last week's shir about Achashverosh's profound sense of insecurity, not being royalty. So for Achashverosh, the more anonymous, the better, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. How could a woman become queen of the Persian Median Empire when absolutely no one knows anything about her background? No one knows anything about it. That doesn't make any sense. Monarchy generally prides itself on pedigree. That's true if you're royalty. But if you're not, then the one thing you want more than anything in a wife is someone who's never going to be a threat to your claim to king. Amazingly enough, what Achashverosh did not know is that Esther Malka was descendant from royalty. She was a descendant of Shaul, who was the first king over Klal Yisrael. So just amazingly enough. Okay, in any event, point is we have identity ambiguity. Let's move on a little bit. Take a look at source number 4. So in this Perush over here, the Rina Chimash says something amazing. It says, Hadassah Hishma, Magedes Hadas, Veish Omim Divrei Yachid. Now, by the way, here's another very interesting idea in the Megillah. In the Megillah, if I were to ask you how old was Esther at the time of the Megillah, what would you say? How old was she? Without giving an age, how would you describe her stage in life? Youth, right? Young. That seems to be clear, first of all, because, interestingly enough, remember, it introduces us to her from her birth. The fact that it's introducing us to her from her birth, in other words, if she was older, it wouldn't make sense to go ahead and give us that entire chronology. The fact that it's introducing us to her, she was born, she has no parents, she was brought up by Mordechai. Mordechai was to her like a paternal figure, like a father. She was to him like a daughter. That sounds like she was very young. And Bepashtas, our association generally is that Esther Amalka was young. There is a wild medrash. The medrash says in source number 4, V'yesh omrim divrei yachid. Others quote an individual opinion. Kibas ayin dalid shana haisa. Esther was 74 years old at the time of the Purim story. So first of all, it's never too late, right? It's never too late for a new chapter in life. She was 74 years old. Now again, that is clearly an outlying opinion, and you'd have to really dramatically reconcile that with the rest of the Megillah, especially given the fact that she did have children. Esther and Achashverosh had children. So, okay, you'll see why I'm pointing this out to you in just a moment. Rashi points out over here, number 6. Remember, so number 1, what's her name? Machlokes in Gemara. Was it Esther or was it Hadassah? How old was she? We automatically assume, and rightfully so, that she was young. Yet there's this other opinion that she was 74 years old. Then we take a look at number 6. What other information does the Megillah give us? She didn't have parents. Rashi says, here's what's interesting. If you notice, the pasuk itself is redundant. Right? How does it start? Mordecai raised Esther. What does that tell you if Mordecai raised Esther? What does that tell you? She didn't have parents. Okay. Then it says again, Ki ein la ava'im. She didn't have a father and mother. And then it says at the end, Uvamos aviha ve'ima, and her mother and father died. So 3 times the pasuk says Mordecai raised her. We would assume that she doesn't have parents. Time number 2, she didn't have a mother and father. And number 3, her mother and father died. Why do you have to say the same thing 3 times in one pasuk? So Rashi says something amazing. What does it teach us? Excuse me. That even for one day, she did not have a father or mother. Meaning, Esther never met her parents. It's not that her parents died when she was young. She never met her parents. In fact, Chazal say that her father died during her mother's pregnancy and her mother died in childbirth. So Esther Malka never met her parents. Now, why am I sharing all of this with you? Because if you notice, the Megillah and the Mefarshim are painting a picture. So let's just go through the information that we just assembled. Number 1, what's her name? What's her name? What's the answer? What's the answer? We're not sure. We're not sure. Is it Esther? Is it Hadassah? How old was she? Not sure. Now here's what's interesting. Parents, now you have to understand just to illustrate this for just a moment. If you notice in Hilchos Avelos, in the laws of mourning, so the longest mourning period in halacha is for, longest mourning period? A parent, which is very strange because in the world of loss, the loss of a parent is, for lack of a better term, the most natural loss, right? We always want it to be that children bury parents and never, God forbid, the opposite. You would have thought that the shortest mourning period would have been for a parent. After all, again, it's painful, it's tragic, it's sad, but that is the natural order of the world. So what's the pshat? Why is it that that is in halacha the longest period of mourning? So Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rav Shmuel Hirsch, all highlight this same idea, which is that the first piece of identity we have in life is from our parents. Right? When you're growing up, who are you? Who are you? Oh, you're so-and-so's child. Right? This is my mother. This is my father. Because when I'm young, I haven't done anything in life. I haven't created my own identity. So my identity, by definition, is gleaned from my parents. So therefore, again, Rabbi Soloveitchik points out, he says, that's why there's always a piece of my identity that's intertwined with my parent. So when a parent dies, there's a certain loss of identity that comes from that. And that loss of identity from a Judaic perspective is the most traumatic thing. There's many forms of painful loss, but loss of identity is one of the hardest things. That's why the mourning period for a parent is the longest mourning period. So why am I sharing this with you? If you notice, right, Esther's the heroine of the Megillah. Yet when it comes to Esther's identity, she's absolutely, almost not anonymous, but bordering on anonymity. We don't know who her parents are, right? Remember again, the Megillah doesn't even record who her parents were, right? We know who her uncle is or her relative is Mordechai, but who were her parents? They don't come on the scene because they didn't shape Esther's identity, because Esther never knew them. So there's parental anonymity. How old was she? Not sure. What's her name? Not sure. I mean, we've narrowed it down to two things, right? But not sure. How overwhelmingly strange this is that the heroine of the Megillah story is cloaked in all of this anonymity. By the way, I just want to point out, compare it to Mordechai. Mordechai, we know everything about Mordechai, right? We know Mordechai's father, we know his grandfather, we know his cousin, we know he was a member of the Sanhedrin, we know exactly when he was exiled, right? With the first phase of Hamikdash, we know that he was exiled with the first wave of exiles. We know everything about him. And yet Esther, who is the heroine of the story, we know so little about her biographically. What's the pshat? Why is the Megillah ultimately, again, why is the Megillah framed in such a way that we all know so very little about Esther HaMalka? Okay, so let's analyze this a little bit more. So take a look at source number 7. So remember, fast forwarding a little bit. So remember now, Esther is in the beauty pageants for Achashverosh's next wife. So the Megillah says, "Ubagia tar Esther bas Abichayil dod Mordechai asher lakach lo lebas lavo al hamelech lo biksha davar." So what happens? So it's Esther's turn now to go to the king. She didn't ask anything. She didn't ask for anything. Now understand, what's the pshat that she didn't ask for anything? Right? In other words, she was entitled, as when you were in the king's harem or you were waiting to be with the king, you could have had anything. So she asks for nothing. So why does she ask for nothing? So if you look at number 8, the Alshif says, Al kim lo biksha davar kim asher amar hagai shahaise ka'anusa shikshitena bal karcha. So according to the Alshif, Esther was showing that she's there against her will. I'm not participating in this. Obviously, again, she's not. Everything is being done against her will, but she's almost like it's her form of protest. By not taking anything, by not asking for anything, she's making a statement, I do not want to be here. But if you look at source number 9, the Ri Nachimash says something so beautiful. Lo biksha davar lahakel al shomreha. Esther didn't ask for anything. Why? She didn't want to put upon anyone. She didn't want to be in trouble. So what you begin to see is just this incredible picture of a young woman who is cloaked in like this life anonymity. We don't know her name. We don't know her age. We don't know her family. When she's thrust into the spotlight, right? Again, now she hasn't yet been chosen queen, but she's eligible for the pageant, right? Not everybody was eligible for the pageant, so she's eligible for the pageant. And the person in charge of the harem says, anything you want, you could have. No, thank you, I'm good. Was it a form of protest? Or was it just simply that Esther was a simple, almost person who preferred complete anonymity and therefore did not want to put on anyone, did not need to ask for anything. So this dramatic picture of this young woman who pretty much is anything but a heroine, right? Anything but assertive, anything but the great orchestrator of some type of divine salvation. And then something happens. Take a look at source number 11. Take a look at source number 11. So, actually, before 11, 10. Sorry. So just to give you background to source number 10. So remember, then what happens? Again, we're going through a lot of the Megillah story. So remember again, Achashverosh then signs the death warrant for the Jewish people. Haman convinces him that the Jewish people are a threat to the kingdom of Achashverosh, and therefore Achashverosh stands ready to go ahead and annihilate the Jewish people. Mordecai sends word to Esther. Esther, you need to go to the king. You need to go to the king, and you need to somehow advocate and supplicate on behalf of our people. What's Esther's response? Essentially, what was Esther's response? No, it's not just not thrilled. She gives him a very nice no. You know, sometimes people say no, and they use every single word in the English language but no. But it's really no. She essentially says no. She says no. Now, what she says is, and that's in source number 10, that she says to Mordecai, everyone knows that if you go into the king uninvited, right, and the king does not extend his scepter to you, you're going to be executed. Everyone knows that. And I have not been called to the king, ultimately, again, for these last 30 days, and therefore, again, essentially, I can't go. Mordecai responds to her in source number 11. Mordecai, Esther. So Mordecai, and this, by the way, source number 11, is probably the most dramatic exchange, the most dramatic line in the entire Megillah. Mordecai says to Esther, Esther, do not don't imagine that if you don't go to the king, that you're going to be spared the fate of the Jewish people. Whatever happens to us is going to happen to you. Now, that's number one. Number one is don't think that you are safe in the palace. Whatever happens to us will happen to you. Furthermore, if you are quiet at this time, salvation will come from somewhere else. You and your father's home will be lost. Who knows? Who knows? Perhaps it was for this very moment that you became queen. So Mordecai is packing a lot into this speech. So there's essentially 4 parts. Part number 1, Jews share a collective fate. Whatever happens to one, happens to all. So you may think that you are safe because you are the queen. But if we go down, Esther, you are part of this people, you will go down with us. That's number 1. Number 2, God doesn't need any of us. God doesn't need us. Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to happen is going to happen. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? The Rosh Hashanah gives us the opportunity to help, to be a cog in the divine wheel. He offers us opportunity to make things happen. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not rely on us to make things happen. So you don't want to go? Okay, don't go. But understand you're going to suffer the same fate. Salvation will come from somewhere else. God is offering you an opportunity, but if you don't take it, salvation will come from elsewhere. And then he says something amazing. And if you don't act now, you and your father's home will be lost forever. We'll have to define what in just a moment. And who knows? Perhaps this is your moment. Perhaps it's, and the Malbim explains, I didn't put the Malbim on the sheet, we'll talk it outside. The Malbim says something so incredibly beautiful. The Malbim says, and it's an inspiring yet very scary Malbim as well. The Malbim says that sometimes a person is put on this earth to accomplish one thing in one moment. And sometimes Hashem brings about multiple generations to bring about one person to accomplish one thing in one moment. And if you chas v'shalom miss your moment, you could deny meaning to your life and potentially to all of those who came before you. So Mordecai says to Esther, let's think about this for just a moment. You're the reluctant queen. You never wanted this. You never signed up for this. And in the craziest turn of events, you are now the person who the king feels the greatest amount of affection for, besides himself, right? You are the person. You are the person. Esther, is it possible that the entire tachlis of your life was for this one moment? Is it possible that the whole reason you were put in this world, the whole reason you were born, was for this moment? Maybe the only reason your parents lived was to bring you into this world, and your grandparents and generations before you was to create a scenario where there would be an Esther Hamalka. And if you don't take advantage of this moment, Hareat ubeisavich yovedu, you and your father's home will be lost forever. That's not a death sentence. What is that saying? You deny moments, you deny meaning to your life. You can deny meaning, ultimately, again, to all of those who came before you as well, which just as an aside, is one of the most profound and incredible lessons of the entire Megillah. Sometimes a meaningful life comes down to one decision you make in one moment. Now, more often than not, it's not like that. More often than not, in life, we have many moments and many dramatic decisions. But sometimes the entire meaning of your life comes down to what you decide in one moment, which is why we must live life with eyes wide open, with attentiveness. You know, the Ramchal, what's the first section in the Ramchal's Mesilas, the first section is Shar HaZehirus. What does Zehirus mean? To be woke, but that's the wrong terminology, right? In other words, to be awake in life, to be awake. We go through life and we're on cruise control, right? We're on cruise, it's interesting. This is we have a lot of emphasis on Klal Yisrael, on technology. And sometimes I think the attention kind of gets diffused a little bit and goes in different directions. But one thing that I think we can all agree on, even if a person has everything filtered to the hilt or everything else, we are so unfocused on life. We're always elsewhere. We're always somewhere else, right? When was the last time that you were actually zoned into something to the exclusion of everything else? By the way, you'll say, Shabbos. It's not true, because on 6 days a week, when you're used to diffused focus, what do you think? Then suddenly Shabbos comes, I light the candles, it's suddenly unplugged into everything? It's not true. It's not true. If 6/7 of my life there's diffused focus, Shabbos is not going to be the same either. We're so all over it. And I'll tell you the danger. The danger is not technology. The danger is when there's diffused focus. How many opportunities do we miss in life? How many opportunities come our way day in and day out to accomplish great things, to become better versions of ourselves, to help people, to make a difference in this world? I'm somewhere else. I am somewhere else. I'm just doing something else. And by the way, the other thing that I'm doing might also be something good, but I'm missing all these things that are occurring right in front of me. Mordechai says to Esther, Esther, pay attention. Pay attention. You want to go, you don't want to go. That's up to you. You'll decide. But just understand, there is a ridiculous moment that is unfolding right here in front of you. You're going to take it, you're not going to take it. And if you're not going to take it, maybe, just maybe, you're missing the very moment for which you were created. And if you miss that moment, just understand, you run the risk of denying meaning to your life and to the lives of those who came before you. Now, Mordechai is not saying to Esther, this is your moment, because Mordechai doesn't know. Remember, again, as you mentioned last week, the Megillah is the first book written in the post-prophetic era. There's no Navi. There's no mouthpiece of God. There's no one communicating, this is what God wants you to do, this is what God doesn't want you to do. There's no one doing that. This is all people figuring things out on their own. So Mordechai doesn't say to Esther, this is your moment. He says it really might be. It really might be. If you take it, incredible, I don't know what's going to happen. But if you don't take it, you understand you run the risk of losing out, of endowing your life with meaning. To me, this Malbim, this piece, this is what keeps me up at night. Because how do you know that you didn't miss your moments? How do you know? By the way, you can miss your moment and still lead a very meaningful life. You just may have missed your moment. You just may have missed that thing that what you were supposed to do. Now, the good news is, even if you don't do it, Kodesh Baruch Hu will get someone else to do it. But I was supposed to do it. It was supposed to be me. It was supposed to be my kochos, my ability, my tikkun on that. It was supposed to be me. I think maybe a large number of us go through life and we do miss that moment. Again, you could lead a very good life, have a beautiful olam haba, do a lot of really great things, but it's possible that if we don't live life with eyes wide open and a tremendous amount of zehirus, that we miss that thing or things for which we're created for. But the truth is, it's also possible to take the album a deeper level. Maybe what Mordechai is saying is like this. Mordechai is saying, Esther, you've lived a relative life of anonymity and of obscurity, right? Right, Esther, no one knows who you are. No one knows who you are. No one knows what your name is. No one knows how old you are. No one knows anything about your parents because they died, right? If you don't even know your parents. And Mordechai perhaps is even saying to Esther, at this moment right now, you have to decide. Do you want to live your life, the rest of your life, in relative obscurity and anonymity? Or do you want to make something of yourself? Do you want to finally cultivate an identity? You could choose to do nothing. You will perish in that obscurity. And by the way, many people go through life in complete anonymity and complete obscurity. Good people doing nice stuff, but the truth is they don't tilt the balance of the world in any meaningful way. Esther, is that who you want to be? Is that who you want to be? Do you want to be the person who no one knows? Is she Esther? Is she Hadassah? Is she 74? Is she 24? Right? What are her parents' names? Where is she from? Is that who you want to be? Or are you courageous enough to carve out an identity for yourself? And then something amazing happens. Take a look at source number 12. Esther then does two things. Number one, she says, Mordechai. Esther says to Mordechai, go ahead and assemble all the Jewish people who are in Shushan. Fast for me, don't eat, don't drink, and we are also, myself, my maidens, we're also going to fast, and then I will go to the king. So the first thing that Esther does is she tells Mordechai, gather the people for public prayer, tefillah. What's next? Take a look at source number 13. Then Esther goes to Achashverosh. We know the story. He extends the scepter. Then by Esther Malchus, so Esther goes ahead. She goes into the king. Right? The king extends his scepter, and he says to her, source number 13, pasuk Gimel, Esther, what do you need? What do you need? I'll give you half of the kingdom. And what does Esther say? Esther, we know the story. What does Esther say to the king? Says, I'll give you half of the kingdom. What does Esther ask of Achashverosh? What does she ask for? What does she ask for? Come to dinner. Come to dinner. I'd like to make a dinner party for you and Haman. Okay. Source number 14. They're at the dinner party. Dinner party 1. Achashverosh turns to Esther. Esther, what would you like? What would you like? Tell me whatever it is. I'll give you up to half of the kingdom. Esther again says, this is source number 14, pasuk Ches, verse 8. So ultimately, then what does Esther do? Then Esther says, come to another dinner party. You ever wondered, so you see, I mentioned this last week, the problem we have with the Megillah is because we know the story, any story you know very well, you use a little bit of objectivity with how you look at it. Like a little bit of you lose some critical analysis. Ever done on you, Esther, what are you doing? What are you doing? You come into the king, right? Time number one, you come into the king, he extended the scepter, your life is saved. Don't you think that maybe this is the time? Like, go for it. I'm a Jew, say my people, no, come to dinner. Okay, and like, what's your plan at dinner? Okay, dinner party number 1. Okay, Esther, what can I do for you? Right? Come to dinner number 2. What's the play? Right? What exactly is the plan over here? So take a look at source number 15. I want to share with you an incredible. So Gemara asks this question. Gemara says, Tan Rabbanon. Gemara Masechus Megillah says, Ma ra'ase Esther shezimna as Haman. As Haman, right? So ultimately, again, so the Gemara is bothered by this. Esther, what are you doing? So it's one thing you ask the king to come to dinner. So you ask the king and Haman? Like, what's the Gemara Chazal trying to understand? Esther, you must have had a plan, but no one understands what your plan is. So what are you doing? Take a look at source number 16. This is a beautiful book called Days of Deliverance, which are essays by Rabbi Soloveitchik on the Megillah. So take a look, source number 16. However, leveling such a charge against Haman entails tremendous risks. It could boomerang. So remember again, what is Esther going to do? Esther can say, Achashverosh, here's my problem. You know your most trusted advisor? Your most trusted advisor, right? The guy pretty much he gave the keys to the kingdom to, well, he's the arch enemy of my people. Now, if you're Esther, you have absolutely no idea whose side Achashverosh is going to choose, right? Because remember, Esther's in the position she is. Why? Because Achashverosh killed his first wife. Why did he kill his first wife? Because she was insubordinate. Haman knows exactly how to prey upon Achashverosh's weaknesses. He knows that Achashverosh has a fragile ego, and so therefore the more he could just build up Achashverosh, the more Achashverosh will be willing to do whatever he wants. Esther does not know if she chooses, she makes Achashverosh choose between her and Haman, who is Achashverosh going to choose? She doesn't know. Therefore, this is the reason for Esther's procrastination and slowness. This is incredible. She dreaded the results of an unsuccessful attack on Haman. She took a wait and see attitude. She waited for something to happen, for an event to occur. She thought to herself, the king is completely under Haman's influence. He has trust in him. I doubt whether I will be able to undermine the king's faith in him. The 24-hour intermission between the first and second feast is the most destiny-charged and most crucial period in the whole story. The question was, will something happen or not? So this is incredible. You want to know what the plan was when Esther invited Achashverosh? If you would have pulled Esther to the side, Achashverosh, what do I want more than anything? Come to dinner with Haman. If you would have whispered to Esther, Esther Malka, what's your plan? What would she have said? I have no idea. I don't know. All I know is I know that I need to get them in a room together and something's going to happen. So they come to dinner party number one. Nothing happened. So she says, okay, let's come to dinner tomorrow night. There's a plan, but the plan is a no-plan plan. In other words, I know that I have to get all the actors underneath one roof. Something is going to unfold. Now, amazingly enough, what happens between dinner party 1 and dinner party 2? That's the night that Achashverosh couldn't sleep. Right? They bring him this book of remembrances. He reads about the fact that Mordecai foiled an assassination attempt. He says, what was the reward for Mordecai? There was no reward for Mordecai. What's happening? Right, simultaneously, Haman is constructing gallows in the king's courtyard to hang Mordecai. Achashverosh hears the noise. Mi b'chotzer, who's out there? It's Haman. Haman, come in. Right? What should we do with the man? Again, Haman thinks the king is talking about him. Achashverosh says to Haman, go do everything you said to Mordecai, al tapelo davar, give him the king's clothing, ride him on the king's horse. And remember again, by the time Haman finishes parading Mordecai, it's time to what? Go to the second dinner party. So already again, what happens between dinner party 1 and dinner party number 2 is the king remembers Mordecai, what Mordecai did for him. Mordecai Yehudi, Mordecai is a highly visible Jew, and already again, there's a crack in the relationship between Haman and Achashverosh. Esther succeeded, Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, a young, frail maiden, the daughter of immigrants, defeated the most powerful prime minister in the annals of Persia. The charismatic woman upon whom God let his spirit descend and upon whom God placed the burden of becoming the people, this woman nation emerged victorious. Yes, Mordecai was the initiator, the teacher, the first messenger. He awakened her. He fired her imagination and sensitized her heart. Through him came the inspired word to her, yet the strategy was hers. The critical decision, how and when to do it, were hers. She could not consult Mordecai. And even if she could, she would not have accepted advice from him. Providence wanted her to do everything on her own, all by herself. God's spirit descended upon her, and she attained victory. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, do you understand the drama over here? Esther, so right, Mordecai says to Esther, Esther, this is your chance to no longer be anonymous. This is your chance to create and cultivate an identity for yourself. No one knows who you are. No one knows what you're about. But you've been placed in this moment. So you have a choice. Retreat into the shadows of obscurity and anonymity, or cultivate an identity for yourself. And what does Esther do? Esther becomes a master manipulator. A master manipulator. She is moving everyone around exactly where she needs them, and no one even knows what is happening. Get Achashverosh and Haman underneath the same roof, something will unfold. Now, by the way, Esther's also a very smart woman, right? Because what she also understood about most men is that they have oversized egos. right? I include myself in that statement, right? Oversized egos. She understood where there are egos, just give it a little bit of time. Just give it a little bit of time. And somehow, someone's going to do something, right? Because remember, what was Haman's mistake? What was Haman's critical flaw? Haman's critical flaw is that he needed to construct the gallows in the middle of the night. What's the matter with you? You're going to do heavy construction in the king's courtyard in the middle of the night? What a chutzpah. Who do you think you are? You don't do that. But ego. When ego gets in the way, so as Esther was, I don't have a plan, but I also know that if I get everybody together, somehow, some way, everything is going to come together. So Mordechai is the one who says to her, here's your chance to cultivate identity. Right? Are you going to take it, or are you going to retreat into the shadows of complete obscurity and ambiguity? So she becomes a master strategist, figuring out how to get everybody exactly where she needs it. But remember, what else did she do? She also gathered everyone for tefillah. Now, if you take a look at source number 17, this is a much longer piece, which we're not going to get into right now. But Rabbi Soloveitchik makes a beautiful idea over here. He says as follows. He says in paragraph 17a, he says, the inspired charismatic woman is superior to inspired charismatic man in two areas: the area of applied practical thinking and the area of prayer. Now, this is interesting. Rabbi Soloveitchik then goes on. You could really look at this. Actually, skip down to paragraph C for just a moment. The gesture of cunning. Now, on one hand, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, Esther was cunning. Right? Why was she cunning? Because, again, she was manipulating everyone. She was. She knew the king loved her, or whatever. I don't know, loved her, lusted her, whatever it was, right? But Lamai says she prayed on that, and she said, "Come to the party." She knew that at the end of the day, Haman was power hungry, and he was not satisfied with what the king gave him. He wanted more and more. Get these two egomaniacs in one room together, and something is going to go down. She was cunning. She was sly. She was a strategist. She knew how to manipulate in the right way. Interesting, if you look at paragraph C, the gesture of cunning and that of prayer represent two opposite aspects of the human personality, which find their reconciliation in one woman. Watch this. Cunning, in contrast to slyness, is an art that only the adult is capable of mastering. Only mature people, toughened by experience, have the ability of planning strategy, of devising schemes, of not overlooking the smallest detail and not dismissing the most far-fetched possibility. An immature person cannot engage in the art of diplomacy or military strategy. A teenager may display extraordinary capacity for creative thinking. It can happen that one area of the brain of otherwise immature person can be charged with enormous intellectual energy, while others areas are still dormant. However, practical, intuitive thinking is beyond the capacity of a teenager. So what Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying is like this. To be a strategic person, what do you need? What do you need? Life experience. Right? Because only with life experience do you realize what people are capable of, what they can do. Even when someone looks at you and tells you one thing, that may mean something else, that the friends of today could become the enemies and backstabbers of tomorrow. An adult understands this because an adult has lived this. And as such, an adult could go out and cultivate strategy. Young people, Baruch Hashem, for the most part, don't have that type of life experience. They could be smart, but they can't be strategic. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, I would never appoint a teenager to a sensitive, ambassadorial position. Only a grown-up person, mature both intellectually and emotionally, paragraph D, should be entrusted with such a mission. Providence appointed Esther to the most sensitive diplomatic post. It is clear that she had all the attributes indispensable for such a mission. She was mature, rigid, and flexible all at the same time. Now, the one more paragraph, E. On the other hand, prayer is an art that a child knows best. The mature person is a cynic, a skeptic, too practical-minded, too tough and insensitive. Maturity ennobles and corrupts man at the same time. When is man summoned to pray? When he is completely overpowered by emotions, by black despair or dazzling joy. So this is incredible. The highest level of tefillah, actually, you could find in children. And by the way, it's true. If you ever a person has a privilege to go to a sitter party, right? Sitter party. So, right, what are the adults often in the crowd thinking? What are the adults thinking? Right? How long is this going to go on for? right? And you look at the little paper crowns that everybody's wearing, like, really? Like, that's the best they could do? Like that, I'm paying like a lot of money in tuition. There's no one more creative at this place to be able to this. Meanwhile, the kids, top of the world. Top of the world. Like Moshe Rabbeinu standing on top of the mountain, right? Couldn't. Why? Because there's a certain simplicity in children that allows them to go ahead and experience things in a pure fashion. Adults, it's the same way, by the way, right? How do you make a child happy? A little child, what do they need to make them happy? What do they need to make them happy? Give them a lollipop and they're happy. By the way, when children become higher maintenance, that's not a child problem, that's a parent problem. Parents make their children high maintenance. If you give them everything and do everything for them, okay, so you've created a new threshold, that's the new expectation. But children in and of themselves, it's interesting, life is very cyclical. Like between the ages of like 1 to 8, all we need is something sweet and someone to love us. Then between like 8 and 80, we become incredibly complicated. And then like at 80 again, all you need is something sweet and someone to love you, and you're very happy again. It's these fascinating like poles of life. We recognize that a little sugar on a stick and someone to hug you, you're like, I'm good to go. I'm good to go. I don't really need anything else in life. It's all of those decades in between that we become incredibly high maintenance. Rabbi Soloveitchik writes that the essence of prayer as an experience, is most felt by someone who possesses the simplicity of children. Complicated, cynical adults. That's why, by the way, why do many adults have difficulty connecting to tefillah? Right? It's right. Many teenagers often, because real tefillah requires a certain level of what we call pashtos, of just simplicity. Children have that. Adults very often lack that. Children often don't have a problem expressing themselves emotionally. Adults, a lot of time, have difficulty with emotion. Prayer requires, so what is Rabbi Soloveitchik saying? If you notice, what's fascinating about Esther Malka? She does 2 things. Number 1, prayer. Tefillah, organize everyone to daven. Number 2, a master strategist. What does Rabbi Soloveitchik point out? These are 2 polar opposite skill sets. Esther Malka says we need to daven and get everybody together. Not everybody in there. Get everybody together. Let's just daven. Let's just daven. Daven for what? By the way, if you notice, she doesn't say daven for what. Right? Daven to rescind the decree. Daven what? She says somolai. She right? Fast for me. Daven. She doesn't ask them to daven for anything. She just says daven. Because sometimes the most beautiful tefillah experiences are not when you're davening for something. It's just when you daven for the sake of davening. Tefillah represents an opportunity for connection, not because I need stuff. We all need stuff. Not because I want stuff. We all want stuff. But the most pure and beautiful tefillah experience when you just connect for the sake of connection. Esther says, get everybody together and daven like children. And then on the other hand, what does she do? She's cunning. She's manipulative. I know those words sometimes sound negative, but they're not negative in this context. She's a master strategist. She knows, I don't know exactly what to do, but I know exactly where I need everyone to be so that everything could unfold. Let's look at the last paragraph, paragraph H. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, the Jew should be adult and child, grown up and immature at the same time. When called upon to act as divine agent, to be a history maker, the Jew must be mature, courageous, and intellectually developed. When it is time to pray, the Jew must shed his maturity and reach out for either the enthusiasm or the grief of the child. The woman is more of an expert in playing this double role. Esther performed it magnificently. She knew how to be cunning and how to pray. Therefore, the Megillah is named Esther. So do you want to see the greatest part of Esther Malka? So watch just what's happening over here. How does Esther begin in the Megillah? Right? What's her identity in the Megillah? In the beginning, what's her identity? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know her name. We don't know her age. We don't know her family. And in that pivotal moment when now everything is falling apart, Mordechai says to Esther, Esther, you have a choice you have to make. Do you want to consider to live, or do you want to continue to live a life of anonymity? Or are you ready to go ahead and cultivate an identity? And what Esther Malka teaches us is even if you started as a no one, you can become anyone. Even if you don't have a real identity, create one for yourself. In life, you make you into the person you want to be. And by the way, Esther didn't just become someone. Esther became the synthesis of two opposite identities. She was able to be a heartfelt child, encourage you to just come to daven. I'm not asking you even to daven for what. Just let's connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the most beautiful and emotional way, not asking for anything specific. Let's just daven. And then she becomes the adult master strategist. Esther Malka goes ultimately again from no one and then becomes someone. And I think this becomes an overarching message of the Megillah, which is at the end of the day, we so often become locked into these preconceived notions of who we are and what we are and what we're not. I'm this kind of person. People do this all the time, right? Like, this is my hashkafa, this is my approach, this is what I do, this is I do this, I don't do this. Okay, and by the way, sometimes in life we cultivate an identity for ourselves, and maybe when I was 20, it was a good identity. Maybe when I'm 30, it needs to be revisited. Certainly when I'm 50, I definitely have to pivot in the way I do things in life. We get locked in to who we are, what we are, and the way we do things without ever asking ourselves, is this the right identity for me now? Is this the right approach for me now? Life is all about the power of the pivot. The greatest koach that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us was the ability to change, right? The ability to pivot, the ability to say, okay, yeah, things work at different. Some of us, the approach we've taken has never worked, but yet we still remain steadfast attached to it. Others, the approach I took when I was younger was good for when I was younger, but it's not good for the stage I'm in now. I need to pivot. I need to change. I need to adapt to my new realities. You might say to yourself, impossible. Change is not possible. Love it or leave it, right? This is who I am. This is what I am. And what happens? We open up Megillah Esther, and the greatest message of Megillah Esther is the power and the ability of self-transcendence. You can make yourself into whoever and whatever you want to be. Obviously, again, if you always wanted to be tall, but you're short, okay, that's an immutable reality, right? You always wanted to be a professional athlete, you wanted to compete in the Winter Olympics, okay, you're not going to be, an alpine skier. Okay, fine. Certain immutable realities. But besides that, those aren't the important things in life. When it comes to identity, who you are, what you are, you control that. If you're happy with who you are, fantastic, build on it. But if there are things in your life that you know that you want to change, and there are things in life that you want to pivot to, and things you want to do differently, but you don't feel that you have the koach to do it, open up Megillah Esther. Esther went from a no one to a most dramatic someone. And not just to a someone, but she reconciled two usually irreconcilable pieces of identity. She was a masterful strategist of an adult and a beautiful, heartfelt, emotional child. She was able to create that dramatic pivot. Don't get locked into preconceived notions of who and what you are. Find the courage to discover your kohos. Find the courage to discover your why, your purpose, what you're here to do. Be ready to embrace the power of the pivot and become the person you are capable of becoming. It's not easy. Just to be clear, it's not easy. And even when you do it, it doesn't mean things, go the way you want. I always say in Megillah Esther, one of the most striking things to me is we always go ahead, right, Megillah's over. However, the Megillah's over, everybody's so happy, so excited, right? Shoshanas Yaakov, Talav Samecha, we're singing. It always struck me that, when the Megillah's over, everyone's happy except for one person. Right? Who's not happy? Esther. The heroine of the story is locked in a marriage to a man she did not want to be married to. And if you go with the narrative that she was married to Mordechai, then every single day she sees the man that she wanted to live her life with, but she's stuck in a marriage to a man who I can't imagine she has love or respect for. That's Esther's life. That's Esther's life till her last breath. That was her life. So we finish and we're all happy, especially prom night. You get to go home to eat, great, everything is fantastic. And it's incredible to see that's the heroine of the story. As everyone else goes back out to celebrate, she retreats back to her life in the palace. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu never guarantees anyone, and everyone lived happily ever after. That is not guaranteed to anyone, but that's not what a meaningful life is about. A meaningful life is not about, birds chirping, rainbows in the sky, right, and everyone lived happily ever after. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us is to strive to lead a life of meaning. And to lead a life of meaning, we have to figure out what we're capable of. To figure out what we're capable of, we have to be willing to engage in the journey of self-discovery. The journey of self-discovery requires us to do serious personalistic inventory of who we are, of what we are, and of what we're not. And then to find the Esther Hamalka courage. Pivot. Sometimes to forge a totally new identity, sometimes to embrace multiple identities, sometimes just to pivot to something a little bit new. But Esther Hamalka did it. And we are here today because she made the conscious decision to leave the shadows of obscurity and anonymity and to embrace this dramatic twofold identity. And if we could harness some of that strength for ourselves, to think about the way we live, who we are, the identities we've cultivated, to find the strength to challenge them. Are they right? Are they good? Do they need to be adapted? Do they need to be changed, swapped out for other things? If we could find that Esther Malka courage, then there is no telling what we could accomplish as well. Stop it for today. Shkach, everyone. I don't think we have is there a schedule for sure next week? Okay, I don't think there's, if you're not on the WhatsApp group, the QR code for the WhatsApp group is here. This is kind of where we put all the updates for everything. Shkach, everyone, have a wonderful and a good Chodesh to everyone.